So welcome to Discovering Buddhism, session number 4 of the third module. That's right, isn't it? Obviously, we're session 4 out of 6 of the third module, which is presenting the path. So we've looked at, in the first module, the mind and its potential. Maybe some of you remember that one. Some of you are new, so you won't remember that one. Then we looked at how to meditate. And then now we're here presenting the path. The next one is going to be the beginning of the Lam Rim, because then we kind of go into the Lam Rim in details from this point on, and establishing a daily practice. Spiritual teacher, so that'll be the next module. Probably going to me leading that one as well. You can't get rid of me. But then after that, well, actually, unless Venerable Rabina, I don't know if you know anyone other than Venerable Rabina Corton, she very kindly offered to lead a DB class, 6 sessions. So we're just trying to negotiate how she can fit that in because she's very busy. But let's see, that would be amazing if she can help us with that, obviously. Otherwise, I'm afraid she's got me. So let's start with a motivation. And as usual, I'll share some slides with you. You're not obliged to joining any of the prayers or anything. Just do what you feel most comfortable with. That's perfectly okay. We'll just wait till this last person's joined in the group, and then we shall start the slides. Here he is, Stuart from Nottingham. Welcome, Stuart.
Hi, Stuart.
I'm not sure what you said there, Stuart, but welcome.
Are you all well? Are you all?
We're all well. I think we're all well. Yes. All right. Here we go then. Presenting the path. So I'm just going to mute you if you haven't already done so. Okay then, so let's start with our refuge and bodhicitta motivation as usual. We should be used to it by now, shouldn't we? So the idea here is that we're setting a positive motivation so that the action that we do together, the action here being studying together and listening and meditating together, that becomes Dharma practice in the sense that it becomes causes of happiness in future lives. Remember, we're talking here about these 3 scopes. So the first scope is already thinking about future lives, right? And the others are all kind of implied future lives, isn't it? Enlightenment, liberation. It's going to take a few lifetimes. So for it to become any of those practices, those levels of Dharma practice, small, medium, or great, we need to be thinking about preparing for future lives. So that's what we're doing here with Refuge. So Refuge is we're taking safety from lower realms rebirth for a small scope practitioner. We don't want to end up in the lower realms because there we would not only experience great pain and difficulties, but a spiritual path would be temporarily blocked. In the middle scope, we're taking refuge from even the upper realms because those temporary happiness distractors, temporary happinesses will distract us and keep us trapped. And then the danger remains that we could still then fall into lower realms at some point. So we need to be out of the whole cycle of upper lower completely. So to take safety from those is the goal in the refuge mind of a middle scope being. And then to recall these different levels of suffering which we understood then really well in the small and middle scopes, where all our mother sentient beings still exist. Small and middle scopes, the lower and upper realms. So then you take refuge from all their suffering, in the sense that you want to liberate all of them from their sufferings. So you become the real refuge then for others by becoming a fully awakened being. You become the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. So that last level includes this bodhicitta motivation, right? The wish to free all beings from suffering. So let's recite this verse together. Let's do it once in Tibetan and then twice in English together. Sangye churang soki churnam la jancho badu dadni kapsuji dagi churnyangi besanamgi drala penji sangye drapara shom. Sangye churang soki churnam la jancho badu dadni kapsuji dagi churnyangi besanamgi Drala penche sangye drapasho. And what's in English? I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, thank you, everybody. So just to recap where we are with the outlines. So we've done looking at Buddha and the Four Noble Truths. And then week 2, we went into more extensively how we received those teachings from the Buddha indirectly through a great line of, passing from one realized being to another, great beings, great masters who've practiced in different times throughout, the last 2,500 years. And the closer we get to where we are, the realized masters that we rely on, so tracing it back and back and back all the way to Buddha Shakyamuni. So we looked at that, and especially the focus on this module is on Atisha. So why was Atisha important? Anybody? He already starts with the questions. It's literally been 5 minutes.
He sort of combined all the teachings and into the Lam Rim.
Yeah.
Fantastic, exactly. Yeah, he was the first one to create a text which starts this Lam Rim teachings. He's the creator of the Lam Rim. Although all the steps were there already, of course, the Buddha already taught them, but he compiled them into this graded series of steps. He was the first one. Yep. Who did Atisha write the Lam Rim for?
It was for the king of Tibet.
Right.
He was invited back to Tibet because the king thought that the Dharma was being forgotten or misused.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So he asked for Atisha to come back and teach.
Yeah.
I can't remember the...
No, that was great. That's really great. He exactly right. Yeah, he wrote it on behalf of the Tibetans who requested. To get Lama Atisha to go to Tibet was a whole, process that took a lot of months. And then the places where Atisha was already teaching in Alanda Monastery, monastic institute in northern India, were very reluctant to let him go. But in the end, Lama Atisha saw that it was beneficial, even though it was short in his own life. So if you can read that life story of Atisha, it was really inspiring. Week 3, we looked at preliminaries and the small scope motivation and practices. So that was last week. Preliminary. So then these are weeks 3, 4, and 5 are dividing the Lam Rim then into the outlines. It's kind of preliminaries, then small, middle, and great scope. So I've divided it into 4 there. Don't call it preliminaries in the the text, but it's just before you get to small scope, there's some meditations to think about. So I've called it preliminaries there. So in my mind, 4. Because even before we get to the small scope, is a very important meditation that we need to do, right, to make the first one in the small scope really powerful. What's this meditation then? You have to remember some of these outlines now. What is the meditation you do in just before the start of the small scope?
Is it precious human life?
Yes, precious human rebirth. Why is it precious, Stuart?
Because it's difficult to get and it's easy to lose.
Fantastic.
And it's an opportunity to progress, isn't it?
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, so there's 3 outlines. Go with that one. You know, identifying it. What exactly is a precious human rebirth? And that's qualified by a list of 10, a list of 8 freedoms and endowments. And then it's difficulty of finding it and its great importance. You know, so you kind of think about that's what I mean. If you memorize the outlines, then you can slot in meditations when you do retreats and listen to teaching. So they're always useful. Very good. What's the first meditation? Then somebody else on the first point of the small scope.
Remembering death.
Remembering death. Good. And what's that about?
So it's not remembering about that we are dying, be miserable, but remembering about that we want to be achieved again the precious human rebirth next life, and it's we can die at any time. So that's why it's precious to start studying and make progress.
Very nice. Yeah. There's 9 points. Does anybody remember the 9 points, or 3 of the 3 main outlines for the 9-point death meditation?
It's certain it's definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
We don't know when it's going to happen.
Right.
And there are lots of different causes.
The last one doesn't sound quite right.
Okay.
The first two
Dharma is the only thing will help us at the time of death.
Right. Thank you. I'm not sure who said that because
it was me. It was Anne.
Anne. Thank you, Anne. Great. Yeah. So the time is the death is certain. The time is uncertain, and then the time of death, only Dharma is going to help in the sense that you can't take anything with you. Any possessions or worldly things that you've got are not going to help. It's only the positive karma that you've created, and therefore the imprints in the mind that are going to help with where you go next, right? Because that's the whole point of that meditation, as Adita said. Very nice. Good. Okay. What is the somebody else then? Who else have we got in here? In here. Who else have I got on my computer here? I've got Jake. Jake, what is the small scope practitioner aiming for in all this?
It is it's basically previously your interest would be just in the one life, and I guess is it like sort of this life becomes incidental, and you're sort of more worried about your future lives.
Exactly that. Well done, Jake. Yeah, very nice. Yeah, nice about that. So the small scope practitioner is working for a precious human rebirth, you could say, in the next life, right? They're working for a happy rebirth next to continue. We've got to be able to have a base on which to continue the spiritual progress. And the best place in all of samsara to do that is where we are right now, in the middle of the extremes of pain and pleasure, if you like. We're right in the bang and right in the central place to make the most progress there. Yeah. Thanks, Jake. Does Ian or Miranda, what about you? Can you tell me what are the practices of the small scope practitioner? What are they looking at for their practices? How are they going to get this precious human rebirth? If you don't know, it's fine, just say, but you have to unmute yourself.
Preliminary meditations.
Yes, but what are their practices that they're going to do? It is
abandoning to attain the aspiration of refuge and karma. Abandoning 10 non-virtuous.
Fantastic.
Actions.
That's exactly, yeah. So they're going to abide, if you like, understand and abide by the laws of karma. Means, by engaging in positive actions, they're going to get a positive result. They're going to get rebirth, and specifically, take refuge from the lower realms. And the kind of where that karma practice comes into a list, if you like, or actually actions, is the 10 non-virtuous actions, the first 7 particularly, right? Actions of body and speech. Great. We're all really understanding a lot here, really well. So superb. Let's move to week 4 then, where we are now. So there's a lovely quote here from Lama Yeshe, which we're going to come to today, because we're talking about the middle scope today. So I'm just going to read it out. Why do we human beings suffer, and why are we confused? Because our minds grasp at happiness and pleasure. Failure to understand the transitory quality of temporal pleasures causes us to cling to them. But if we developed penetrative wisdom, we would see that this grasping attitude only gives rise to problems. We would also understand that by overcoming our attachment to ordinary pleasure, we open the way to joy of inner liberation, liberation from suffering. Therefore, we have to learn how to experience pleasure while remaining detached. In other words, we must learn about renunciation, the basic principle on the path to liberation. Not asking a lot there, is it? So it's like you have to be able to, somehow live with amongst all these objects, which is very easy to get attached to, and kind of just see them for what they are, temporary, pleasures, as Lama Yeshe says there. Yeah. So you have to learn to live with these pleasures and accept them for what they are, but not become stuck, so that you can't see past what they're really. They can't see past their limitations. Right, and we're going to explore how this middle scope practitioner is going to reach that goal here with these first lots of meditations in the middle scope. So this is just the outline that I mentioned earlier, just a visual clue there to remind us. So we looked at preliminary meditations, looked at small scope. Here we are with the middle scope. And as I mentioned before, the scope's pattern, if you like, of these the way the Lama Tisha has put it in the text, very clever. So first of all, he would show us how to generate the wish of a middle scope practitioner, or the aspiration, as I put here, and then the practices that middle scope person would do to achieve that goal. Yeah. So with this small scope, then, what happened with the part one there, how to generate the aspiration, was you got a practitioner rebirth, which is great, but death is certain, you don't know when, so you could lose it, and you could go to the lower realms. So those kind of combined led you to then have the aspiration, I've got to make sure I get a precious human rebirth next. Yep, so that was generating the aspiration part there. Is that all clear there? Then the practices were then how to do that was take refuge, generate karma, positive karma, to be able to actually create the right causes for that. Because having the aspiration isn't enough. You've got to actually make sure that you on the basis of the aspiration, then do what's needed. Yep. Those two go together. So we're going to look at those in respect to the middle scope here now. Let's just remind ourselves of the aspirations. This was what I asked Jake earlier. So in a nutshell, gain a precious human life next life. That's what the small scope practitioner is aiming for. Right? And that means, that place in the middle of all those realms. It's not in the three lower realms where practice is going to be impossible. It's not in the upper realms in the sense of God realms, because there the pleasure is going to be too intense. We won't be able to keep detached. We won't be able to see the transitory nature there, because they'll just be so phenomenally amazing that we'll just be caught up, and that'll be it. It'll be end of spiritual path for the time being. Yeah. So it's like the two extremes. I often think of it like, I feel sorry and a bit kind of jealous also. Like people with lots of money and lots of power, or famous celebrities. Won't mention any names, maybe. Like people from my childhood, like Madonna, for example. It's just, she became, at one point, she was the most famous person on the planet. I mean, not so much now. Some of the kids at school I teach don't even know she is now, which is like, what? But, she was just like at the peak. She was, the most powerful, musician, artist, whoever. And there was no way that she would think of, renouncing all that for a spiritual path, really, would there? Because she was on such a wave, making phenomenal amounts of money. People left, right, and center were wanting to be near her. She had such power. People were praising her left, right, and center. Just to have a name associated with her was so powerful. It was just like incredible influence. Someone with that much, positive karma ripening was able to exert, right? So then when that power fades, or kind of she becomes a bit less popular, perhaps because of the younger kids take over, Beyonce's and whatever, then it kind of gets a bit difficult for those beings, with lots of positive karma, right? Because you've had something amazing and it disappears. And at no point, would you, in that process, would you be thinking, actually, it was all transitory anyway, I could let it go, because it was just so phenomenally, Does that make sense? I was just my own little thoughts about those. Maybe you have better examples in your own experience of that, right? It's interesting to think about those beings in the God realms as being, in unfortunate positions, because you'd think that being in that position of great power and great wealth and great pleasure would be, solving all the problems. But actually, it's worse. The stories, for example, of students of the Buddha who've had amazing positive karma ripen, and they've got the God realms, and they've got no time for the Buddha then, because they're just so blissed out with all the, all the sex, all the food, all the amazing enjoyments that those beings are having up there. It's just like, there's no time for Buddhism, really. There's no time for a spiritual path. Forget the Buddha, forget all that. Does that make sense? The unfortunate thing there is that it doesn't last, right? Just the same way that the hell realms and the lower realms don't last either. That karma gets exhausted. The opposite is true. The positive karma also gets exhausted. So what's worse, that the negative karma gets exhausted and you go up, or the positive karma runs out and you go down? It's definitely the one where you go down that's going to be the worst off, isn't it? And there's these awful stories about when gods are getting to the near end of their life, the other kind of gods shun them because they can see that they can kind of see that the time is coming when they're disappearing, and they start to sweat and the bodies become like more human-like. And they have all these signs coming, and they kind of get really frightened because they can see, they have this minds where they can see where they're going next. And all the positive karma is running out, so they know they're going lower realms. After all that, experience they've had, this great pleasure, they can see they're just going straight to the bottom again. It's just said to be the most incredible, unbearable suffering, unimaginable suffering. They can't do anything about it at the time; it's too late. So it's a trap, and that's partly what we're looking at here. In the I'm going through all this for a reason, just blah blah. There's a reason, because as Lama Yeshe said, we have to try and understand how to live with pleasurable objects without getting attached and just see them for what they are. So we're in the right place for that. If it was too extreme in either direction, we wouldn't get it. But here we have a chance. So let's get to it then. Middle scope. Generating the aspiration is about reflecting on suffering and its causes in upper realms. I mean, the underrealm, the lower realms you've already understood, probably, But the point of the middle scope practitioner is that even the other parts which you thought were fine are also temporary. They're unstable, and to rely on them means you're just going to end up in real difficulty in the end anyway. Yeah, so this kind of completes the picture about the whole of samsaric existence, the whole of cyclic existence, or samsara. All those terms are synonymous, right? Samsara is a Sanskrit word. Cyclic existence is a translation some interpreters use for English. Interpreters, what's another way to say it? Cyclic existence. I can't remember, there's another one. It's quite common. Anyway, you've probably already heard of these terms already, right? And it's how the Buddha found that all living beings and enlightened living beings, except those foe destroyers, those unenlightened living beings, unliberated living beings, are trapped in, or to some degree or another. So the aspirations that we're trying to develop in the middle scope then are to see the reality of samsaric existence even in the high realms. Is that all make sense? And the practice is that once that aspiration is generated, is to use the 3 higher trainings And that's how we get out of samsara, because that's the goal of, you know, the middle scope practitioner, is to get out of all the realms completely.
Is it okay to ask a question now?
Yes, is that Anne, is it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a really silly question, but it's puzzled me for a long time. If you go into the higher realms because it's good karma, that's why you go up there. So when you're up there and it's good karma, why aren't you a good person helping all the other God beings up there? I don't get that. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Or is that nonsense?
So when you sit up there, you're talking about, so if you have positive karma to be born in the God realms, and you're born there, then what? Sorry, then what?
Well, you're up there because of the positive karma. So you go there with really positive karma, and presumably a very good background. You should be. So why aren't you behaving as a good person up there in the God realm, helping the other gods?
Yeah. Well, you know, when you mix things like, you know, karma, cause and effect with beginningless time, you get all kinds of tiny little variations and nuances, which are only explainable by fully enlightened Buddhas, they say. Karma is only fully explainable by Buddhas. Yeah. So what we're talking about, you know, if we think about the human realm, to be born in the human realm requires a phenomenal amount of positive karma. So let's take where we are as an example, phenomenal amount of positive karma. So let's take somebody who has all this fantastic karma to be born human, but also has all the resources they could ever want, all the power they ever want, you know, the influence they ever want, like trying to get away from pop stars, trying to get away.
Is it sort of a case that power corrupts, sort of thing?
Not necessarily. It's just, you know, that because, you know, you haven't necessarily developed a spiritual path, but you can still engage in karma that gets you to a higher realm. So it doesn't mean that you haven't got any disattachment from objects, you haven't realized any wisdoms, but you've got all this positive karma ripening.
Yeah, but I'm sorry I'm going on about this, but it's bothered me for a long time. I can see that, you know, all right, imagine that the higher realms and there's a mix of people, and the reason they've got there's a mix, but like us here. But then surely some of them got there with good karma for good reasons, and why aren't they still doing their bit up there?
Yeah, they all got there for karma for good reasons. That's in its essence, isn't it? Its nature is that it must have come from positive actions, otherwise it wouldn't be positive karma. So it's definitely positive karma that got them there. So I'm
gonna have to keep thinking about this one. I've puzzled about this for a long time.
It's a fascinating question. You know, I'm not sure I've got all the answers, but what I understand is that, for one thing, the pleasures that you experience on the basis of a positive karma are so overwhelming. And nobody, you know, everyone's experienced the same kind of thing in the God realms. They're all kind of blissing out in this pleasure. So there's no need for anything, no need for any to be good or anything in the sense of trying to liberate them, because everything is fine as it is. There's no motivation to go anywhere else. It's perfect from their point of view, you know, obviously not from the correct point of view.
It's because they can't see suffering. Yes, I'll keep thinking about that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to then how you actually generate the wish to be free. And the wish to be free here is sometimes called renunciation, which is this kind of one of these three principal aspects of the path to enlightenment: renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view. And the renunciation is this wish of the middle scope practitioner. Renunciation is a bit of an old Victorian word, but it just means the wish to be free from samsara, wish free from suffering and its causes. And how you do that is you engage in the three higher trainings, which comes down to wisdom realizing emptiness, which is the correct view. So those the three principal aspects of the path relate to this middle scope. The great scope also needs those two, but they're concentrated on bodhicitta, which is the third one. So how to develop the wish to be free? Well, it's just simply a method of looking at the different realms of samsara in the upper realms and thinking, actually, they're also pretty miserable in the end. or unsatisfactory or not, reliable, not sustainable. Essentially, in a nutshell, that's all we're doing in the middle scope meditations. So you can do that. I asked a Lama once, can you do this just on the basis of meditations on the human realm? Can you just skip out all the other realms and just go to the one that we're in, the human realm, and just concentrate on that? Well, will that be enough to develop this mind of renunciation? And he said, yes. So even if you just think about the human realm and its problems and its difficulties, and why in the end even a human realm isn't desirable, then that's enough to develop renunciation from samsara. Yeah, and it's an actual mind, a realization that you generate. It's not just you might have a wish for it once or twice, but it's actually a mind that we're aiming for. It's like the wish for future lives. It's a stable mind that doesn't disappear once it's kind of embedded in and you've repeated it, etc. So I'll put down here one of the lists of different ways of thinking about the mess of even the upper realms: birth, aging, sickness, and death. So I've mentioned some of these before. Maybe it's new to some of you, maybe you won't, so I won't spend too much time on it, but this relates to a particular one of the Four Noble Truths. Anyone know which Noble Truth this relates to?
The first.
First Noble Truth, good. The truth of suffering. So it's called suffering, or it could be unsatisfactory nature, or dukkha, I want to say it. Yeah. So there's lots to say about this topic, right? And perhaps if you're interested to know more, you could look at the actually on YouTube, the videos that we did as part of the Basic Program Foundation Day. Went into a lot of detail about these areas, because that was about the Four Noble Truths. And here we are with, with Four Noble Truths are covered, quite extensively in the middle scope, because we're looking at suffering and its causes, suffering of samsara and the causes of samsara, in essence, right? So it comes up in the middle scope. You do look at it in the small scope as well, but it's complete, if you like, in the second scope, the middle scope. So I'm just going to move on to the causes of samsaric existence, which are, so you've got to understand the results of samsaric existence, the symptoms, if we're talking about illness, the symptoms and the cause. That's what we've got to look at. Those are the meditations that help us generate the wish to be free. Yep. And that is the first two noble truths. And a bit of the third, to know that liberation is possible. So what are the causes of psychic existence? They are karma and afflictions. The actions done under the influence of negative minds. That's what keeps us trapped in samsara. Yeah. And interesting, out of those two, what it comes down to is the afflictions, because, without the afflictions, you wouldn't generate an action. Without a motivation, there is no actions, right? So in this level, does that make sense? So what we're talking about causes, it comes down to afflictions. And all the afflictions, you can have 3 root delusions. And we know what 3 root delusions are, or 3 root afflictions.
Hatred, greed, and delusion.
Yeah. Or I tend to use attachment, aversion, and ignorance. So attachment are the minds that grasp, aversion are the minds that push away, and the root of those 2 is ignorance. So when it comes down to karma and afflictions, it's afflictions. When it comes down to afflictions, it's the ignorance. Yeah, the ignorance that sees ourselves and other phenomena as existing inherently, when it doesn't. The ignorance, which misknows things, actively misknowing things all the time. It believes wrongly all the time in all phenomena, all things and events, and therefore we have all the afflictions. So that's the cause. So then you can see why the wisdom realizing emptiness becomes important, because the wisdom realizing emptiness is the key to liberating from samsara, which is what we look at in 3 higher trainings, right? So ethics. We have to give a basic. So what we're trying to get to here is the third one, wisdom, realizing emptiness. But for that, we need a good level of concentration, because without concentration, we can't penetrate deep enough or profound enough with the mind. If it's too distracted and fleeting and not, stable and still enough, we won't be able to combine it with wisdom sufficiently to generate the minds we need Does that make sense? And for concentration to be stable and still and reliable, we need to have a good basis in our daily lives. Otherwise, if we're running around full of guilt and anger and attachments, etc., and letting the mind just run crazy, there's no chance for concentration. That's quite common sense, isn't it? Yeah. So these 3 steps, if you can't have the wisdom without the concentration, you can't have the concentration without the ethics. So it's not the sense that, Buddha's just saying, be good, otherwise I'm not going to give you this realization. Don't hear it like that. Just hear it on the basis of logical progression. Ethics is always the basis, because on that you can start to control the mind. You can get control of the body and speech, then we can control the mind, and then we can start to have the realizations. So the message is pretty similar to actually what was in the small scope, right? Remember, because the Buddha said, first of all, get a grip on the body and speech with the 7. The first of the 10 non-virtuous actions is the body and the speech ones. The first 3 of the body, 4 of the speech, and then the mind. So the process is the same here. It's just taken to another level in the middle scope. So once we have developed the aspiration to be free from samsara, we've explored all the sufferings and the causes, we have a strong wish to be free, then we actually understand what the root cause is, the ignorance. We understand, therefore, what the root antidote is, the wisdom, the ignorance and the wisdom, what it comes down to there. So you do everything in your power to remove the ignorance by generating the wisdom, and then liberate yourself from all the realms completely, which is the 3rd noble truth, that the cessation of all the suffering and its causes. So you can be out of samsara completely, out of having to take a rebirth in any of these unsatisfactory realms. With me so far? Any questions? So here's the attitude of a person of middling capacity. Develop an attitude about cyclic existence, like those who feel aversion for their confinement in a blazing house or a prison and want to escape. This is a direct quote from Lama Tsongkhapa and Lama Rinpoche. So it's like, we have to imagine the mind, when you've got it, is like you find yourself in a burning house and you're desperate to get out, or in a prison and you definitely want to escape. I think some of the texts you say it's like your head is on fire and you're trying to put it out. It's like that kind of urgency. That even applies, to upper realms where we are. You have the burning desire to get rid of, this unsatisfactory nature, this unstable space we find ourselves in. That's something that comes across all the way through, these meditations that you do in the middle scope, the unstable nature because of impermanence of where we are. And you learn more about that as you go along, right? It's unstable because, it could end at any moment, as we know, and we could go to the lower realms, as we know, but even the upper realms, if we find ourselves there, it's only temporary. And if we lose the plot, and we could go further up or further down and be out of the zone where it's best to practice. And because the human life is so rare, the space is so rare, we're right in the middle of it all. It's very difficult to find. If we get off, we might not get back again. It's not reliable. So while you've got it, you have to do what Shantideva says. You have to treat the human body like a boat to cross over samsara into the shore of liberation. So you have to use it. You can't get there without it. But in the end, you abandon the boat and you're liberated. Very nicely put by Shantideva there. Okay, so we're going to go into discussion a bit earlier because I've got a conundrum for you as part of the discussion today. How many are we in the group here now? We're 9. So we could have a group of 8, so 2 groups of 4. Okay, so this is what I'd like you to think about. If bodhisattvas develop disgust for samsara, which is what we're talking about, the middle scope, aspiration, right? Then they won't come back and help others. So developing disgust for samsara is not appropriate or is inappropriate. Yeah, that's the statement that comes in the Lamrim Chenmo when we're talking about this topic. Does everyone understand the statement there, all the parts of it? So bodhisattvas are working for living beings, right? Who do everything they can to help living beings, sentient beings. But if you're developing for discuss samsara, like it's a burning house, doesn't that seem like, you know, it's not for bodhisattvas then? Or is it? So that's your mission, should you accept, right? Everyone got that down before I stop sharing screen? Okay, I'm going to divide you into two groups then. You've got about 10-15 minutes or so to discuss that. And if you kind of feel like you've got it, you want to move on to something else and there's still time left, then please do. But see if you can, you know, explore those options together and really see if you can understand what it means, you know, to develop this aspiration to want to be free from samsara and how that works in relation to bodhisattvas. Yeah, okay. Let me just move you into breakout groups and I'll stop the recording. All right then, so the mission was there to think about, you know, how is it that bodhisattvas are going to develop, you know, disgust or renunciation from samsara and still, you know, be a part of samsara. Sounds like a contradiction, right? So what did you think?
Well, we thought that bodhisattvas were a little bit like members of the fire brigade, that they would be disgusted at the fire, but they would go back, and that their equipment were things like, you know, realizing emptiness, which would be their equipment, and compassion and that kind of stuff.
Look at that.
Wisdom.
Yeah, that's a very nice way of putting it. I like that. Can I use that in the future? Good. Which group was that? Was that
Our group.
That was our group.
what about the other group?
I didn't write all the question down, so I must apologise. So,
What question did you answer?
well, we were having a discussion.
I bet it still makes sense.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm.
Can I ask a quick question?
Who's that?
And it's showing like my newness to this, so it's very basic. But can a bodhisattva, because of their actions and practices, actually regress to a lower level?
Yes, exactly. I
Is
know
that-
where the question's coming from. I should have maybe explained that. But bodhisattvas at certain levels have the ability to be born wherever they like. You know, they make aspirational.
Yeah.
And because the power of their karma, and certainly Buddhas can do that. They're out of the whole mess completely. And certainly certain of the bodhisattvas can do that. But even lower levels can decide where they decide to be born, you know, in whatever way that is, to help. Right. Does that answer your question, Miranda? Yeah.
It does, thank you.
All questions are welcome. You know, that's what we're here for. Yeah.
Correct.
So what was your discussion then, John? Yeah.
Well, first of all, Miranda was asking what a bodhisattva was, I think. So from that, because we were talking about the role of a bodhisattva in samsara. So for me, a bodhisattva would only gains enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So all sentient beings would have to become enlightened before the bodhisattva, I believe. Regarding the disgusting samsara, the part of the question I wrote down, what I thought was, why would a bodhisattva not help somebody who has a disgust for samsara? Is that correct? Is that what the saying was?
Develop disgust.
So if a person's got a disgust for samsara, why would a bodhisattva not help? Was that the main gist of the saying? That's what I've got wrote down. Ah, thank you.
Yep.
I think can I just put in a word there? Is that all right? My view was that a bodhisattva, even if they did develop a disgust for samsara, that would be, they would turn it to a positive thing. They would see that this is something they need to help people in more with, because this is how it was. I'm not expressing myself pretty well, but in other words, it would always be turned around to eventually work for helping more sentient beings. So whatever, I don't think, it's not to put them off, it's just another challenge, isn't it, really?
But from that discussion point, now I've read it, I think personally that's completely wrong.
Explain, John.
Well, a bodhisattva does develop disgust for samsara. So that's part of what, for me, a bodhisattva would do. So there is no question that they wouldn't want to help others. And developing disgust for samsara is not appropriate. For me, that's part of what we're doing. That's what we want to aspire to.
Yeah.
But isn't it that the bodhisattva will be so disgusted with samsara they would never come back?
Yeah, but the job of a bodhisattva is to help sentient beings out of samsara. So to say developing disgust for samsara is inappropriate, I think it should be completely the opposite.
So the bodhisattva should not develop that one. They should skip that realization, and they should see.
No, a bodhisattva has disgust for samsara.
Okay.
The way I read it is the bodhisattva has disgust for samsara. So they would want to help others who haven't a disgust for samsara, but you would want to the bodhisattva would want to help people develop a disgust for samsara, because that is what we want to break that chain. We want to leave samsara. That's how I read it. So for me, that saying is the wrong way, is wrong. Personally.
Is that what the rest of your group kind of thinks? Aditya, what do you think?
This is complicated for me, but yes, if the bodhisattva wants to help, then he or she doesn't has to help people to develop the disgust to needs to help people to develop the disgust to samsara. Yes.
So do the bodhisattvas develop this disgust for samsara themselves or not?
I think they are above that.
I do.
And they know that above that, they know what samsara is. It's not a nice place.
And that's the motivation, is the disgust.
How, Stuart, Stuart, just say that example about the fire brigade and the fire and the...
Well, the fire brigade, the fire brigade are the bodhisattvas, and because they have a disgust for fire, samsara, but they go back to help people who are stuck in samsara, but they use their equipment, their realizations, so emptiness and stuff like that, to go back in. And Jake mentioned actually lowering a ladder so that people can actually climb up, and yeah.
Getting very good with the analogies. Jake, tell us about about this statement? What did you think?
Me? I don't think that was my idea, but I can't remember who said that.
I think the ladder was.
Well, what about generally about the statement? Do you think is that analogy right with the firemen and the fire rescue?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're going back to help them, even though you know it's kind of dangerous or whatever. For me, like disgust seems like quite a strong word. Maybe it's more like we should be, or a bodhisattva should be developing acceptance rather than like such a visceral word as disgust.
But that would, like, if your analogy, that would be like saying, you know, it's okay for these people to be burned alive in the house. That's acceptance.
I guess.
Where does compassion come into this?
So one second, let me just explore this for Jake. So maybe disgust. I mean, disgust is a word that I use copied exactly from the book here. So, but maybe there's a better word than that. I mean, acceptance, I don't think is the right one either, but disgust maybe isn't right either.
Yeah, I don't mean as in accept that people are going to burn, except that you have to go back in there.
Okay, right.
Okay,
yeah.
I guess that's what I mean.
Yeah. So it's like a disgust, or you could say, you know, for the people suffering, you know, you have to accept that. What you're accepting then?
I guess you're accepting that you have to go and be a part of that to help them get out of it.
Yeah.
Were you showing compassion?
So the compassion there is,
yeah.
The compassion is that you can't bear the suffering of others. You want to remove it. So you can't bear the fact that people will be burning in this house and potentially getting killed. That, and you get in there and do the work of a fireman or whatever it is. You know, to use analogy to it. That is the compassion. So you know, if you didn't really care about these people in the house, then you wouldn't go in, would you? You wouldn't be bothered, right? So it's the compassion is the key there for bodhisattvas. But we're going to look at that one next. I'm just kind of bridging a little bit here between the two scopes.
As a member of the fire service, you'd also want to put the fire out, wouldn't you?
Well, the fire isn't so. Well, yeah, exactly, but only because people. If there's no people in there, you just leave it, wouldn't you? You wouldn't bother. So it's only the people's, you know, suffering that you're worried about as a fireman. I think in the end. You know, analogies are only good up to a certain point, so we shouldn't take them too far. Plus, I get stuck. But it's an excellent point. Yeah. So, because so this debate is interesting when you're reading it, and if you want to read it in the Lamrim Chembo, it comes up on page 328. It's just like, because at some places the Buddha says, you know, bodhisattvas should enjoy cyclic existence with joyous effort, you know, and that seems like a contradiction, you know, on first reading, that, you know, you're supposed to develop renunciation and wish to be free from cyclic existence, not enjoy it. But I think, you know, that conversation with Jake is similar, because what it means is, you know, you should have real joy and enthusiasm for getting in there and helping other people and getting them out. But at the same time, you definitely do not want them to suffer. The whole reason you're doing it is so these people have a painless time of it, right? Oh, Anne's got the there, I can see. So it's on page 328, section C, Disturbing Misconceptions. You want to look at that. So there's a summary here, the whole argument that says, I'll just read it out for you. It says, hence, the Buddha says that not being disenchanted with cyclic existence means not being disenchanted with accomplishing the good of living beings in cyclic existence, as well as enjoying this activity. Yep. Ian says he can't hear my voice. Can everyone else hear me?
I couldn't. I've had to turn up my thingy. And now I hear better.
I just had the book in front of the microphone. Sorry. Yeah. So I'll read it again. Hence, the Buddha says that not being disenchanted with cyclic existence means not being disenchanted with accomplishing the good of living beings in cyclic existence. So you're supposed to kind of, you know, not, it's like, if I put it in the positive way, you need to enjoy cyclic existence in the sense that you need to enjoy and have enthusiasm for helping living beings in samsara. That's what the Buddha means when he says, you know, Bodhisattva shouldn't develop renunciation, and it's not strictly speaking. Just, you know, it's in the small print, isn't it? These things. These debates are really helpful. This is how Tibetan Buddhism works. Here, like, yes, these debates and discussions, like so and so says this, and then you debate that, and I think, well, actually, maybe they're right. Maybe Bodhisattvas don't need this one. But as you know, the analogy with the fireman shows, you know, it's
Kerry, in the book it does say, although it is, as you know, although it is appropriate in the Hinayana to cultivate disenchantment, so they always have a different view of how they're looking at it.
Now, because you know, you know, without getting too complicated, the different vehicles. Some practitioners are only working for liberation from samsara. They're not working for living beings. Hearers and such realizes, if that means if that term means anything to you, but some in the scope of things are not working for liberation for all living beings. So once they're out of samsara, once they're out of the burning house, that's it. They're not going back. They're out. They're not finished, actually, as it turns out. They'll have to, you know, finish the job in the end. But for as far as their goal is, they're not willing to go back. They don't have that brave attitude of firemen. We're not all willing to be firemen, right? So
or women.
We haven't got enough enthusiasm for that, perhaps. So
yes, I spent 20 years in the Hinayana, so I'm more familiar with that than I am with this.
Right, okay.
And I find it really interesting that that statement is there, because I didn't see it like that. I'll have to look into that one as well.
Right,
thank you.
I hope that helps then, yeah. Yeah, so you know, the danger is for bodhisattvas is that, you know, they become, when they're out of samsara, they don't go back. You know, they haven't got enough compassion or enough kind of enthusiasm to get back in there. So that's the danger for bodhisattvas at some certain levels. And that's called falling into the existence of peace, like a blissing out in liberation. So that's always to be avoided. That's an extreme for the bodhisattva, but it's a goal for others. So, you know, it depends on your motivation. Yeah. Nice. Okay, good. Can you all hear me now? Correct. Okay. I'm not too quiet now, Ian. Is that all right? Yeah. So let me just get back to the slides to finish up with. So to recap then, where we've got to in the grand scheme of things, we're looking here at the middle scope practitioner, someone of middle scope, or someone doing the practices of the middle scope, you know, because a bodhisattva also has to do these practices, remember. So the bodhisattva also wants to be liberated from samsara, or wants to get out of the burning house, but it's not their main goal. Their main goal is to get out, get the training so that they can help others, everyone else get out. You know, some people are just wanting to get out and not go back in. So that's kind of like both people practicing the same method of getting out of the burning house, getting out of samsara completely. But some, you know, are not doing it for that specific reason. Some are doing it so they'll have, you know, more methods to help. I'm going to keep using that analogy. Can't let it go now. So how you develop the disgust of samsara, the wish to leave, is you have to realize that the place you're living in is a burning house. And we don't right now. We think the place we're living in is great. Unfortunately, we haven't realized, you know, its true nature underneath. We haven't realized how unstable it is, how long it's, you know, haven't realized that it's not going to last long, and it's quite a precarious position to be in. And not only that, things that rely on unsatisfactory, the more you have of these pleasures, temporary pleasures, worldly samsaric pleasures, isn't it? They kind of leave unfulfilled, like drinking salt water or honey-covered razor blade. Sometimes they use that phrase. That's what the pleasures of samsara are like for us in the upper realms, anyway. Yeah. So we need to reflect on that until it becomes, you know, that we want to get out of that. We don't accept that temporary happiness. So we're going for real, solid, stable, everlasting happiness. We're just craving happiness junkies, really, as Buddhists. Ultimate narcissists. You know, we just want happiness all the time and nothing else. But real happiness, not this, you know, rubbish crap here that Samsara's peddling. Right. So that's what Buddhists are all about, right? And you do that by the three higher trainings. How you get out of the burning house itself is by practicing the 3 high trainings, particularly the wisdom realizing emptiness. You need that to be able to get out. Yep. So everybody needs that. Bodhisattvas, the middle scope beings who are, we're looking for individual liberation, and the bodhisattvas of the great scope, they have to go through this stage also to get out. Everyone's going for that one. Apart from the small scope, there might not be, remember, but the middle and the great are both doing these practices. Let's go back to this statement of Lama Yeshe and see if that helps us a little bit more now that we've had a little discussion on it. So let's the third sentence here. Failure to understand that the transitory quality of temporal pleasures causes us to cling to them. Yeah. So if we haven't understood their real nature, we haven't understood the honey-covered razor blade, then we're going to be stuck with them, and that's going to be just a pain because they can only provide us temporary, nothing real lasting. It's okay. Lama Yeshe was also, says in other places that it's okay to enjoy temporary pleasures as long as we're realistic about what they can offer, and don't think they're going to be the cause of all our happiness, because they won't be. So it's okay. We can enjoy them. We can enjoy these things. We created the karma for them, as long as they're realistic. They're only temporary. So let's just skip to the end sentence there. Therefore, we have to learn how to experience pleasure while remaining detached. In other words, we must learn about renunciation, the basic practice on the path to liberation. We have to use what we've got here only as a means to get out of the system. We have to use the system to get out of the system. It's like you use the matrix to liberate ourselves from the matrix. You have to get in there and use it. But just accept that it's all, merely labeled. We all know it's a projection, right? If you realize the matrix is just this computer program. I'm carried away with me analogy again. So, you know what I mean, right? So let's do a dedication then together. Thank everybody for that. It's a nice discussion there on the middle scope practitioner. And the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths, as I said, are key to this middle scope. The first two is developing the aspiration. You realize that cessation is the way out of samsara. And the path, is that 3 higher trainings. I think it's concentration and wisdom. Wisdom, realizing emptiness is the path. So let's just dedicate then any positive karma we've created by looking at these paths to liberation. May become causes for us to do just that, to liberate ourselves from all the temporary sufferings, temporary happinesses that shall only bring about pain in the end anyway. And let's go for real happiness for ourselves, first of all. And then we think, all our dear sentient beings who we care for, we have a close connection with human beings, living beings, all the different realms of existence. So these beings find themselves in. We've also been there too. We can't remember, we've been there. So we understand all the levels of samsara by the middle scope. And then it's just another step forward to think, well, if I can get myself fully qualified, I'll be the real refuge for others and be able to liberate everyone else. Because not everyone else understands the path. Most of them are just stuck, unsure, thinking that temporary things are the answer. So I dedicate that you become fully enlightened for all living beings, moved by great compassion for their suffering. Let's just recite this verse together. Chan chu sen cho rimbo che ma ke pa na ke gyu chi ke wa nyam pa me pa yang gu ne gon du pe wa sho. Thank you, everybody. Great. So next week we'll do the great scope then, the Bodhisattva's scope. Well, the Bodhisattva's been doing all these scopes, but this is, where the Bodhisattva's essence of the Bodhisattva is. So let's look at that on Tuesday next week. Thank you, everybody. I'm back here in 15 minutes for the Bodhisattva. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Gary.
Bye now.
See you next week. Take
See you
care.
guys. Bye.